Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are tuning in from today. We appreciate you being here. As you can see, it is the two of us this evening. Our fearless leader and host is sitting on a beach somewhere, enjoying a Mai Tai, I hope. I, of course, am Bentley Danger, and here I have with me old RC Buford. RC, how are you feeling this evening?
Oh, pretty good. I came here. Wimbenyama was the first pick for my favorite franchise, the San Antonio Spurs, and I'm glad to be back in business.
Yes, yes. Noted Spurs fan RC Buford wearing a Rocket shirt, ironically enough.
Yeah, I'm hyped.
Um, so this is another episode, another off-season episode of Backyard Buckets presented to you by Backyard Sports. Um, there's not a lot going on in the NBA world today, or recently. Gary, what's up, dude? Good to see you.
What's up,
Um,
Gary?
so we thought we would do something a little different, right? Something that I don't think it's ever been done before. I don't think I've seen anyone ever do this before. What we're about to do for y'all tonight. We are
Probably a
going.
good reason for that.
Yeah, probably this could be terrible, but we're going to do it anyways, and we're going to have a good time doing it. Tonight we are going to go ahead and redraft the entire 1990s of the NBA. We're going to take those 9 drafts or 10 draft classes, however many it was, 1990 through 1999. You guys can count. And the first 2 rounds, and anyone that was available to be taken, we are going to redraft them into teams of 15. And then for next week's episode, Ryan will have simmed those through the 2K machine, and we'll see whose team wins the 7-game series, mine or Ryan's. RC is an actual team builder, so I figured I'm just going to address him as Ryan tonight to make it a little more fair. We did flip a coin. I did call Tails Never Fails, and I did win the first overall pick. Ryan, do you have any comments before we get into this draft?
Yeah, I got a few. One, it's hard to be here without Gary. I just want to say that. But really, I feel like a lot of dead weight is gone. I like the guy, but it's just been a freeing experience. Just you and me. It's basically like work, sitting across from each other and disagreeing, which is one of my favorite things. Yeah, when you got the first pick, as far as this goes, I thought there's 2 guys in my mind that you probably go here, and so I've been sitting here for a little over 24 hours thinking about who I'm going to go on my side of the snake, and so yeah, I'm excited to see who you take.
Yes, yes. I've been pondering. That's not the word I'm looking for. I've been pondering my first overall pick for about 8 minutes now. Not 24 hours. It's not nearly as stressful when you don't have to decide how to counter the number 1 overall pick. All right. Like Ryan said, we are doing a snake draft. For those who do not know what that is, basically with 2 people, you get back-to-back picks. That's kind of how that works. Again, we're going picks 1 through 30, 2 teams of 15, and we will have the results back next week based off of 2K simulations. All right, let's get into it. Number 1 overall draft pick from the year. All right, let me find him. From the year 1992, my apologies. From the year 1992, none other than LSU legend Shaquille O'Neal will be going first overall. He's coming off the board. He's going to be my center. Shaq, for his career, had a 181.7 win share rating. That is extremely high for those that don't know. Extremely high. Not the highest in the 90s. That player will come up likely next. But he is up there. He's a top 5 guy in win shares. He averaged 24, 11, and 3 on 58% field goal shooting for his career, which is just insane. He's a Hall of Famer. He made 15 All-Star teams, 14 All-NBA teams. He won an MVP, made 3 All-Defensive teams, won Rookie of the Year, and 2 scoring titles. Also, I didn't write it down. I think he has 4 titles. So my 1-1, Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, great pick. Great pick. He was one of the 2 I was thinking that you might take. I think under the assumption you get the best possible version of Shaq, which is what this is, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to argue with the pick. One of the most dominant forces of all time for sure. Especially if you get like the defensive versatility he had, like kind of early to early middle of his career, and then the offensive talent, like the offensive dominance of the middle of his career, like combined, that guy's crazy. Hard to combine that in real life, but hey, it's different, right?
Yeah. Gary
right.
with the big words tonight.
Well, I think yeah, preponderance. I don't know what that means. It's not a civil case.
There's no preponderance of evidence.
This is basketball jurisprudence, not whatever you're talking about. I think I have to take the obvious pick here, maybe the greatest winner of his generation. And many people might be thinking I'm taking Shaq's famous teammate, but I am not. I'm talking about Tim Duncan, R.C. Buford legend. He's not going to be the dominant guy Shaq is. You get some versatility. You can play him at the center and the power forward, which is nice. I don't think you can play Shaq at the four for very long. Maybe against like a Two Towers team, but probably not in this iteration. So I like the versatility that he can play both. So I can later on in the draft take somebody else. Yeah, I mean, he was a 15-time All NBA, 5-time champ, 15-time All Defense. He's pretty good. And the ultimate team guy,
Yeah.
Does a little bit of everything. Ultimate. Yeah, I am. I am snaking Kobe by not going to pick him at 3. That's what I'm.
Yes. Oh no.
I think you'll find out really quick that me and Bentley are lower on Kobe than probably the consensus is. So yeah, taking Tim Duncan number 2. My number 3 pick is really what I've been thinking about, right? Because it was like I'm going to take one of the 2 guys. I think we've already taken, in my opinion, the 2 best guys drafted in the 90s. I think I want a combo Tim Duncan with a guard, and I could take a guard that I know Bentley wants, but I'm not. But I'm not going to do him like that because I know he wants him that bad. So I'm going to take a guy that I love, and in his peak, I would have loved to see next to Tim Duncan. I'm going to take Tracy McGrady, number 3, which I know is a shock for a lot of people. But I think getting his peak version, you get a top 5 guy, probably of guys drafted in the 90s. And again, he can play 3 or 2 positions, really. He can play the 2 and the 3. So I'm just trying to keep my positional versatility because of his length. And I feel like Kobe is probably the better player, but gives me less versatility later on. And I like to be able to play guys in multiple positions because even though this is the 90s where that wasn't really a thing, thank you. Yeah, I got to take my guy. This is Bentley's guy too, but as a Rockets fan, I got to take my guy, especially after taking a spur and getting sick.
Shocking news: Tracy McGrady on my big board.
Oh, write that down. All right, you're up. You got the next 2 picks. You have 4 and
I do. Coming back around the snake. I am shocked that you took Tracy McGrady there. I'm not going to lie. I guess I shouldn't be shocked because I know that you love him and he was a Rocket. That's a solid start. That's a very good start to a winning foundation there. Both future Hall of Famers, so can't go wrong with that. All right, so I've got 4 here. 3 did not go the way that I thought it was going to go. So T-Mac was not in my 4 position, so I thought I might be able to snag him later. However, the 2 guys that I have sitting right here that I'm deciding between are still both available. I'm going to, yes, absolutely. If you ask me, I'm just as good as Kobe from a talent perspective. I am going to take Kevin Garnett here.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Kevin Garnett, again, he can play next to Shaq. He played next to centers his whole career. And if we want to go small, if Ryan throws out Tim Duncan at the 5 at some point, we can go Kevin Garnett at the 5. I think just based off of you taking Tim, I need a defensive guy that can run around with Tim, and take some of that defensive load off of Shaquille O'Neal in the paint. And Kevin Garnett can fill it up too. I mean, I think he was a 20 and like 11 guy for his career. I didn't write down those numbers, but he had 191.4 win shares for his career. The dude did a lot of winning, especially when he left Minnesota. But even when he was in Minnesota, like he's in MVP conversations most of the time that he was there. Also, I get him at 19 years old, and I can develop him to be anything I want. So love that coming out of high school. Guys,
Also, super switchable.
Yes,
right? Like
very much so. Yeah,
for a modern game.
One of the earliest like stretch fours in the league, can guard like 3 through 5 basically, and even some 2s probably.
Yep.
Guy's a Hall of Famer, 15-time All-Star, led the league in rebounding 4 times, won an MVP, won a Defensive Player of the Year, made 9 All-NBA teams and 12 All-Defensive teams. Carried some Minnesota teams, as Gary says. Yes, very much so. He was a dominant force in Minnesota for sure.
I think Garnett, during his peak, was arguably as good as Duncan. He had some seasons where he was probably better for short amounts of time. Duncan had a much longer and more successful career, but Garnett in his peak was probably as good.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so for all of those reasons listed, I will be taking Kevin Garnett with the 4 overall pick. Now, Ryan mentioned that I've got a guy. And boy, do I have a guy. We were just talking about him before we went live, actually. And I believe it was 2007 in the Western Conference semifinals. He averaged like 40 and 12 because the Dallas Mavericks at the time were like, hey, you can't beat us with your passing. You beat us as a scorer. And so my man, Steve Nash, said, all right, I can just do it both. Average 40 and 12, casual, onto the Western Conference Finals, where they dealt with injuries and eventually lost, which sucks because he didn't have a ring. But Steve Nash, my pick here at number 5, 129.7 win shares, maybe a little lower than some people may have expected. But he did do some losing early on in his career. Won a lot of games with D'Antoni in Phoenix, though. He's a Hall of Famer, 8-time All-Star, led the league in assists 5 times, won 2 MVPs. Some would argue it only should have been 1. I would argue it should have been 15. 7 All-NBA teams, averaged 9 assists per game over 1,217 games throughout his career. That's a lot of assists and a lot of games. The dude is probably my favorite point guard of all time. Definitely top 5. I love Steve Nash, so welcome to my roster. All right, so the penalty already won. Yes, my guy Gary, he knows.
This is not a democracy, Gary. Your vote doesn't matter.
Oh, it matters. All right, so my leg of the snake is complete. We send it back to Ryan for pick number 6 here.
Yeah, so I legitimately considered Steve Nash. I had him as my number 1 point guard of draft in the 90s, and I considered him there, but I felt really bad because of your love for Steve Nash. Like I couldn't take him. But I honestly did think about him. It was like 4 guys, and he was one of them, right?
Yeah.
But I immediately removed him because of you.
I would have been honored if you had taken him.
I know, but I know that you would love to talk about him more than I would. And I love Steve. I love those Phoenix teams. I've talked about that a million times.
We're just going to leave this one here.
Okay. All right. So now I think the obvious pick, we got a guy left that's pretty good. I want to say a rest in peace, Black Mamba coming over here, and McGrady and Bryant can play together and decide who was the better one and who's going to hold the ball. I don't know. But it's hard to argue from the wing having McGrady and Bryant together. I think it's pretty much unguardable in this era. The athleticism in their peak and obviously the defensive savvy that Bryant had in his peak. Lost it a little bit as he got older. A lot of people talk about all his All-NBA seasons. A lot of those were not All-NBA defensive seasons. He had lost it a little bit. But early in his career was a great defensive player, so it's nice to have. So I got to take him.
Yep.
And then it gets a little tougher, right? Because now we're getting into each other's positions. Because I've taken a 2 and a 3 and a 4, right? You've taken a 4, a 1, and a 5. So I have to take a 1 and a 5 or go to the bench, and you have to take a 2 and 3 or go to the bench. That's really the option. So it's tough. I was gonna go center, but I'm not. I'm gonna go the great drink spiller himself, Jason Kidd. No, I only need one basketball, and it's gonna go in every time. If there's 13 seconds left, it's game over. I'm taking Jason Kidd here. I think he's pretty close to the most important player here with Nash in a design like this, right? We have a bunch of stars. You need a guy who can get the ball to the stars and can shoot the ball, just like Nash, right? Like Kidd is very similar in a lot of ways, and probably slightly better defensively than Steve Nash. Not as good offensively, but yeah, I mean, Jason Kidd, legitimate star. I think he fits perfectly here. There were some other point guards I considered, but I think you start getting into more scoring point guards and more defensive guys who will come later, I think, further down the roster. But yeah, I'll take Jason Kidd here.
Yeah, Jason Kidd, 9 all defensive teams throughout his career. Pretty impressive. It's a good pick. Back-to-back picks there. Very, very good. I am going to struggle here because I thought I probably would get Kobe in this position.
I don't hate him that much.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What are you going to do, though, right? All right, so we're going to adjust on the fly here, and I have a pick in mind that that just building off of our team building chemistry, I'm going to pick some guys that were actually teammates in the NBA at one point in time, won a championship together. Ryan picked the drink spiller. I'm going to pick the how do I put this lightly? The slightly less bowel control player here to play the small forward position for me. I'm going to pick Paul Pierce here with pick number 8. Pierce will be filling out my 3 position, my small forward position in my starting lineup. Paul Pierce had 150 win share throughout his Hall of Fame career. Potentially a little underrated. He had cramps. Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you ask him, absolutely. If you can get past all the strippers. So, excuse me. Like I said, Paul Pierce, Hall of Famer, 10-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA guy, won a Finals MVP in 2009, and also made the All-Rookie team in 1998. So, pretty impressive career there for Paul Pierce. A lot of people around the Boston area remember him fondly. So that leads me to pick number 9. Now I have a few options here. I have 3 guys written down here for my 9th pick, and they're all available. And they all play different positions. So so this should be fun for me. I need a 2 guard here, right? Basically is kind of what I'm looking at. So I'm leaning towards picking a player that we talked about last week, I believe, when we did the 76 through 100 list. A guy that probably should have been put on the top 75 list. Paul Skidmark Pierce, yes. This is a player who's near and dear to my heart specifically, because as I've said many times before, I am a college basketball fan through and through. This is a player who is in the Hall of Fame. His career was cut short by injuries, though, unfortunately. But on his way to the Hall of Fame, he racked up 7 All-Stars, 5 All-NBAs, and 1 Rookie of the Year in 1994. I will be taking Grant Hill. And either him or Paul Pierce is going to play down. And one of them is going to have to play the shooting guard. But that's fine because I have the greatest point guard of all time facilitating the ball movement. And Grant Hill will be my 5th selection in this draft.
I like that. I like getting the Grant Hill shout out. I think a guy people don't give enough respect to because of his injuries, and probably playing in Detroit probably didn't help either.
Yeah,
during his peak.
Those jerseys, though.
Oh God, amazing jerseys. The horse on it with the like
Mhm.
light blue. We talked about this last week, I think. Great
We did.
jerseys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. Like when I think of Grant Hill, that's what I see is him in that jersey. Even though I
Yep.
like, there's like Phoenix, Orlando. I remember him. Like I probably remember him more from those periods, but the image of like Grant Hill in his peak is in in that jersey, Detroit.
Yeah.
Okay, great pick. I like the starting five. It's pretty versatile at the wing. This is a pretty modern looking team. I mean,
Yeah.
except for Shaq can't shoot, but besides that, like
It's
it's
all
more
right.
of a it's a yeah. He has a ton of elite skills. You don't really have to worry about. Counter the athleticism, Kobe. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I like the pick. I think a move needed to be made, and he needed some length because if you could go small at the two there and be in trouble probably with that. All right, so I get the next two picks.
Yes.
I'm gonna take arguably I don't agree with this, but arguably the greatest international player of all time, Dirk Nowitzki. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to come off the bench or if he's going to play the four and Duncan the five with starting. I'll see what the team looks like at the end. Yeah, I love that. I love the stretching the floor. I think you need a guy who can do that with this team because it's really going to be Kidd and Nowitzki are the only guys really stretching the floor effectively. Bryant and McGrady are average at best 3-point shooters, and Tim Duncan, even though I have seen him take threes and they actually don't look too bad when he's wide open, I don't think he's going to take these a lot in these scenarios, especially playing the five. But maybe we pull Shaq out, we run the five out, and we just drive in with the wings a bunch of times. All right, so that's my first five. I think we're nearing like the best 10 players at this point.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talent at the 1 and the 4 in the 90s, which like makes all sense, and the 2 obviously. But all right, so my first official bench person. This is where it gets tough, right?
One note before you make your selection there. You talked about stretching the floor with Dirk. To that note, he played 1,522 career games and shot 38% from 3-point over his entire career. That's pretty good for a 7-footer.
Yeah, at 7 feet, basically an unblockable shot too with where he shot it.
Yep.
You know, you always hear of the guys like obviously I remember Yao Ming would shoot behind his head and they were like, oh, it's impossible. But just imagine that guy at the 3-point line shooting behind his head. That's crazy stuff. He's a liability on defense though, so that's a little concerning. But you know, we'll deal with that. We'll just outscore everybody. All right. So a lot of options here, I think. I'm thinking of like 3 guys that I like a lot here, but I think you need someone who is going to come in and be able to score.
Bye, Gary.
See you, Gary. And so I'm going to take Ray Allen. And people forget that peak Ray Allen was an all-NBA caliber guy that could score with the best of them. He just happened to become a specialist later in his career as a 3-point shooter, but always could shoot, could get to the basket, could do everything. Got the length to play the 2 and the 3 probably in smaller lineups. So I need the shooting. So that's where I'm going, Ray. And he still has the talent to do other stuff because there are other guys here who are better shooters. Well, maybe not better shooters, but just as good of a shooter. But Ray Allen, he's got the sauce to do other things.
Yes, he does. Good pick. Ray Allen, also a Hall of Famer. 145 win shares for his career. That's pretty good.
Underrated.
Yeah. Shot 40% over 1,300 games in his career. Pretty good. 2 All-NBA teams, like you mentioned. Yeah, I like that pick. It's a good pick. A lot of shooting on the roster with the last 2 picks. All right, so I'm gonna take. I guess this is my first bench guy, right?
Yep.
So my sixth man. The key to a good sixth man is someone that could come in when the starters are out, particularly, and run the team. Keep us afloat till the starters come back in, right? Well, I think this player that I'm going to select here is a little overqualified for that position. He did, in fact, carry a team basically by himself to an NBA Finals. Did not win it, but they went, right? My point guards are going to be very small at this point, but that's all right. We have Shaq. I'm going to take Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson, only 99% win share, but that's because he played on some really, really bad teams in Philadelphia, and he was basically by himself. Again, Allen Iverson, Hall of Famer, 11-time All-Star, won the scoring title 4 times as a 6-foot-tall point guard. Made 7 All-NBA teams. He won Rookie of the Year, won an MVP. 3 times he led the league in steals, so he's probably a little underrated as a help defender. His on-ball defense leaves a lot to be desired, but that's okay. He also, for the entirety of his career, averaged 27 points a game. That's impressive as a 6-foot guy to do in the NBA, in what a lot of people consider to be the modern NBA, really. So Allen Iverson will be my pick. All right, on to pick 13. Excuse me, sorry. There's a lot of talent left on this board. The beginning picks did not necessarily pan out the way that I had, not that I necessarily had hoped, but the way that I thought they would, right? There's some guys that I thought may have fallen. There's some guys that are obviously still left on the board. So at this point, I'm just kind of going for like second team depth. So I'm going to pick center. I will play alongside Allen Iverson on my second team. Now, we just mentioned how Allen Iverson won 4 scoring titles and averaged 27 points a game for his career, right? So I don't need to pick scoring here. So I'm going to go completely opposite of scoring here, and I'm going to take a player who went undrafted in the 1990s. I'm going to take Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace. If I can find him on my board here. There he is. Ben Wallace, undrafted Hall of Famer. Very, very impressive. He's a 4-time All-Star, led the league in rebounding twice, led the league in blocks once, made 6 all-defensive teams, 5 all-NBA teams, and won Defensive Player of the Year 4 times. If that is not one of the true come-up stories of the NBA, I don't know what is. I'm taking Ben Wallace to be my backup big, play alongside Allen Iverson, and control the paint.
Yeah, I like that. I what a story for Ben Wallace from undrafted to taken in the top half of the entire 90s. Yep. That's a great story. I agree. I actually thought you were going with a slightly different center there. AI's teammate. Mm-hmm. I hadn't considered Ben Wallace. I knew we talked about him, but I didn't consider him. Love Ben Wallace, but I thought Mutombo was the guy here, and I'll take him. Right. Just to be nice to him. I think with my team, there's some issues of size and defensive capability on the front line, and I guess taking the guy who's second all time in blocks is like pretty good for that. And one of the great personalities and people in NBA history. Love to have. Really glad, and I think he'll be a guy that can come in and defend against his former teammate AI going to the basket constantly. Yeah, because he's going to go past whoever's guarding him. Yeah, because they don't call carries in the 90s.
Sure, similar to Ben Wallace, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, a little bit longer. Mm-hmm. A little bit longer.
Slightly.
Ben more athletic, but Deke one of the great shot blockers for sure. Yep. All right, so this is a tougher choice. I really feel like Mutombo is an obvious one I needed to get. This is a tougher choice.
But did you say you didn't think of Ben Wallace?
I mean, I had him like on my list.
Did I catch you there slipping?
I didn't. I wasn't going to pick him because I was going to pick Mutombo. Is what I mean. All right. Like you, if you took Mutombo, he would have been like in my conversation.
Gotcha.
There's another guy I would consider with him too, but depending on what you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm gonna start going for who I think is one of the ultimate glue guys in NBA history here, and me and Bentley talk about him a lot as a very underrated guy because he was never the best player on his team, but was often the second best player or third best player on a championship team, and was pretty much that his whole career. And I'm gonna take Shawn Marion. as the glue guy. Also some shooting,
Yeah.
funky shot. For shooting, great defensive player. Can pretty much guard 4 positions, which is super valuable when everybody's a Hall of Famer at every position. Um, and I'm really excited to get some versatility. Like I said, coming off the bench, I really value versatility. I think it's a value a lot of players, a lot of teams realize now as we've gotten into the modern NBA. I think Sean Marion in today's NBA would have been a star just because of how they would play him. And I think Phoenix did a good job of that. They were starting to revolutionize a lot of that stuff, but the rest of the league had not caught up. And I would like to see Sean Marion in the current NBA. That would be great.
It would. I agree. I'd like to see him in the Hall of Fame.
Deserves it for sure.
Yeah, those are really good back to back there. Mutombo and Marion. I love that. So you mentioned glue guys on winning teams, right? So I'm going to take a guy that won a lot of games over his career. Never was the best player on that team. Didn't matter. Was always a contributor. And he's real sneaky because he's a lefty. So I'm going to take none of the Manu Ginobili here. Mr. Ginobili. 106.4 win shares. That's a lot for a guy that's a six man, right? It's a very impactful six man. He's in the Hall of Fame, made 2 All-Star teams, made 2 All-NBA rosters, won Six Man of the Year, made All-Rookie coming in from Argentina. I really like that he played for the same team and wore the same number all throughout his career, so I didn't even have to think about it, Over 1 steal per game as well, so kind of an underrated defender. Over a steal a game, for 1,057 career games. That's a lot of steals. The dude kind of did it all in the offense. A lot of people forget about young, long-haired Manu driving and kind of banging people on the rack. That was bad phrasing, but he would dunk he would dunk the ball over defenders in the paint. And then kind of as he lost a step later into his career, he developed an elite finishing package of layups around the rim, and was always a really good shooter too. He was very dependable from pretty much anywhere on the court on the offensive side, and pretty underrated. I think Pop realized how valuable he was on the defensive end, because even though he didn't start, he would close a lot of games for that San Antonio, team down there. So I'm picking Manu with that selection. Once again, I am adjusting on the fly here because Ryan has taken some of my players. That's okay. The 17 slot on my sticky note here is actually empty because all of the players, Manu was going to be my 20th pick. That's okay. So what I'm going to do is scroll through my list really quickly and pick a name that jumps out at me. No, I'm gonna go back all the way to 1990, and I'm gonna pick a player who's in the Hall of Fame, made 9 All-Star teams, made 9 All-NBA teams, made 9 All-Defensive teams, won a Defensive Player of the Year, and made his All-Rookie team, and now whose child is playing in the NBA. I'm going to take none other than the glove Gary Payton. My backup point guard, Allen Iverson, not a great defender. Manu, though he is an underrated defender, is also not a great defender. Gary Payton is a great defender. He is a great perimeter defender. He can match up just about anybody on the perimeter. The dude was a dog. They called him the glove for a reason. I'm very happy getting him with the 17th pick in this draft.
Yeah, that's great. I was considering taking Gary. I probably would have taken Gary Payton here in my next 2 picks.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad.
Hey.
Thanks for joining. Yeah, I really like that. I think you're a little small coming off the bench, but obviously you're rotating these guys. It's not like all 3 are going to be out there at the same time.
Yeah.
If you're doing the 5 full swap, then you might be in trouble. But I don't think you're doing that with this team.
The 2021 Kentucky.
Yeah. Just you play with these
Line
five
fans.
guys, you play with these five guys. Yeah, the hockey strategy.
Yep.
I like it. All right, so I'm going to take a guy because I feel like I have too many nice people, and that's sometimes a problem in basketball. You need a Maurice Lucas, an enforcer, a guy who intimidates not only the opposing team, he intimidates his teammates, his coach, the referees. And because of that intimidation towards the referees, he gets a lot of technicals. Rasheed Wallace is who I'm going to take here. And I think an underrated player for sure, partly because of his reputation. But as a basketball player, honestly, really, really talented. He has 105 win shares. Good PER. He averaged about 15 and 6 throughout his career. He's a 4-time All-Star, won a championship with the Pistons, obviously.
Yep.
Really good defensive player, great shooter for his size. He kind of becomes that a little later at like 35%, but you need that guy, right? The stretch fours. Played a really long time, could pass the ball a little bit. And like I said, he'll get dirty with you. And you need a guy like that. You have a Kevin Garnett. I feel like Rasheed Wallace and Kevin Garnett would have a great time together.
Yep.
So I'm going to take Rasheed there. And then this is tough, right? Because I think the correct thing to do is take a 1 because I don't really have a guy to come off the bench and take over for Jason Kidd because I have 2 wings in the start. Ray Allen, not a 1. John Marion, not a 1. So you need a guy to handle the ball. So I'm going to take Chauncey Billups, Rasheed Wallace's Detroit Pistons teammate, and another guy who I feel like is a little underrated. One of the better point guards of this generation. Pretty solid defender, obviously, playing on those Pistons teams. He was a 2-time All-Defensive Team player. He has 120 win shares, 3-time All-NBA. He was the Finals MVP, 5-time All-Star. Averaged 15 and 5. He's not like a super traditional point guard, but does enough in the team construct to get it done. And I think that's important on these teams. Like I said, you're gonna be stacked with actual studs who can score from everywhere. You don't need a guy who can do that, right? So getting a guy who shot 38% from 3 and can defend and pass the ball a little bit coming off the bench, you got to be happy with that. And he gets to be with Rasheed, who, that was their peak as far as a team. So Ben Wallace, we'll trade for him. I don't know how, but we'll get the band back together.
Back in 2013, I used to play a lot of NBA 2K. And I had this friend from Franklin County, Virginia. And he used to call Rasheed Wallace Spot. Don't know why. He was like, "That's my boy Spot." I was like, "Why do you call him that?" He's like, "It's just what I call him." So anytime I hear Rasheed Wallace, he goes, "Oh, my boy Spot." No idea what it means, but I love it.
And you'll never forget it.
Yep, never. I like the Chauncey pick. Also, if he gets injured, he can coach this team. All right, so you
Jason. All my point guards can coach.
That's true. That's true. Kind of, yeah. Spilling drinks all over the place. All right, so I'm gonna go with a little more size here on my roster. You have left me a Hall of Famer on the board here, and I do appreciate that. It will be none other than Washington Wizards legend Chris Webber, as we all famously remember him for being in Washington. His win shares are a little lower than people might expect. He was on some pretty bad teams for a stretch of his career. It's only 84.7%. That's okay, though. Like I said, he is a Hall of Famer. He made 5 All-Star teams, led the league in rebounding one year, won Rookie of the Year in 1992. Yep, 93, excuse me, 93, not 92, 93. It made 5 All-NBA teams, and averaged 20 and 10 for his entire career, which was a little cut short by injury, but good enough to make it to the Hall of Fame. So for that reason, at the 20th overall pick, I will be taking Chris Webber. Now we get into a little game theory, right? So I think that your centers are not as good as mine, and that's okay. But there is another Hall of Fame center out here to be had. And so I'm going to take him from you so that I can have him and you cannot. I'm going to take Pat Riley's best friend, Alonzo Mourning. If I can find him on my list, I apologize for the delay here. Alonzo Mourning, Hall of Famer, almost 90 win shares for his entire career. Won Defensive Player of the Year twice in those years. He also made, obviously, all defensive team. Made 2 All-NBA teams, led the league in blocks 2 years, and made 7 All-Star teams. Alonzo Mourning is he's almost a forgotten figure in the NBA. I think people today remember or think of him more as the guy that they do see courtside at Heat games with Pat Riley. But in his playing time, Alonzo Mourning was an absolute force to be reckoned with, especially on the defensive end. And really helped to establish the tone that is the Miami Heat organization that we see today. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way in Charlotte. Probably less to do with Alonzo and more to do with that ownership group. That is, I think the sale went official today or yesterday, one of the two. So happy trails, Michael Jordan. But yeah, Alonzo Mourning, little game theory here, taking him away from your roster to stash him away on mine. So good luck scoring in the paint.
Yeah, I agree. Zoe is a guy that people don't give enough respect to, probably because he missed a lot of time with something that almost killed him. He had an injury, a medical issue that he almost died, and that almost ended his career. And he was able to come back from it. But if he stays healthy, I mean, he's probably. And I say healthy, it's not like his knees were messed up.
Right.
Some they couldn't control. Not you can control your knees, but it's not an injury he got on the basketball court. Is what I mean.
Yep.
Yeah, love the pick. Love the Chris Webber pick. A guy that everybody knows, but no one talks about. It's like he's in that weird like gray area from like, oh yeah, we all know he's a star, and he was one of the biggest prospects ever. But like, was he good? And I think that happens because he was on so many teams, right? Like he was good. He was a great player. He just was on a lot of teams and probably not an amazing teammate. But lots of stars aren't.
Yep.
So yeah, I like the picks, getting some size. I think you needed it with Ben Wallace as leading your second unit. Now you can go size for size with Mourning and all right, I'm gonna go 2 guys right at the end of the 90s. And I'm going to continue to do the positional versatility thing. I'm going to take a guy that a lot of people love nowadays because he has one of the great nicknames of all time. And both these guys have great nicknames. The first guy I'm going to take is AK-47 Andrei Kirilenko. When you're up against as many Hall of Famers, like I said, it's nice to have someone who can get in their way.
Yeah.
And a guy who can play the 3 and the 4 and led the league in blocks one year.
He did.
Basically just weak side blocks over and over again. And I think you're going to have that in this environment. You need sometimes to be able to put that out there, right? It was a first-round pick in 1999, so I'm getting him right at the end of our time here. Didn't have a ton of win shares, but his career was not nearly as long as a lot of the people, and he didn't score as many points. But from a defensive and versatility standpoint, hard to argue with. He had multiple 3-block seasons in the 2000s, which is rare nowadays, and was rare then too, especially from a guy who did not play the 5. He played the 3 and the 4 primarily. Good rebounder, averaged like 5.5 for his career, but had an 8 rebound season one year. Averaged about 12 points per game, but you don't need to score too much when you're playing on this team. You just need to be able to score. Yep. And he definitely could. And a lot of people love him, again, because of the nickname. If he just didn't play for the Jazz, I'd love him more. But, yeah, his career was over basically by, 32, 31. So he didn't play a super long time. He didn't rack up those win shares. But in his peak, super versatile stud, I think.
Yep, for sure.
And then I'm going to take one of maybe the greatest visual experience in basketball history and one of the great nicknames. I'm going to take half man, half amazing Vince Carter. what needs to be said about Vince Carter that hasn't been said by watching him? I don't know. It is a visceral experience watching him dunk, and also you get the longevity with him, right? He played literally forever.
Yep.
He might still be playing somewhere in some
You never
amateur
know.
league. he's still going. He has 125 win shares at 18.6 PER, average 16.7 points per game. But you got to realize his last like 5 seasons, he basically scored very little.
Yep.
So that brought his average down. He had a couple seasons in the mid 20s scoring points with Toronto and then with the Nets. Little bit of a problem teammate early on in his career. There's some criticism of him. And those Nets teams kind of imploded with Jason Kidd and Richard Jefferson, Keith Van Horn, and those guys. But yeah, this is a guy I can bring him off the bench. He can shoot the three, which we need, especially late in his career because that's all he did. And he can just jump over Ben Wallace because he's so tiny. So yeah, I'm gonna go there, and a guy who can play like 3 positions. So
Yeah.
I think it's again good for my model of my team.
For sure, 100%. Love that actually. So I'm starting to slow down a little bit here. The momentum is the momentum is lost. You know, I've gotten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, a bunch of picks already. I think I've got 11 picks here. So we're getting to the nitty gritty, kind of splitting hairs here. But there's a guy that I'm looking at right here. I have listed at pick number 24. He has kind of fallen on my draft board a little bit. I've moved him around a couple times just based off of picks that were made. This guy, I'm going to pick him because he also is a Washington legend. He went to a school that I don't necessarily root for, but I have a lot of respect for, right? He also has a pretty good nickname, in my opinion. We're getting some of the teammate cohesion back together with him and Ben Wallace. And he's also one of the most visually appealing people to look at on a basketball court, like your guy, because he wears a super cool mask and it's like Batman. I will be taking Richard Hamilton. Great last name. You know, I mean, only real ones understand why his last name is great. And for those people, I say shout out you. He has a pretty low win share, which is unfortunate. But the Washington teams you're on were not good, so I think that brought it down in the end. He's only sitting at like 63 win shares for his career. That's all right. In my notes here, I have that he, so he made 3 All-Star teams, right? That's kind of the only like award, like stat thing I wrote down for him. But I also wore a cool mask. So, you know, for a little team cohesion with him and Ben Wallace, I love to see it. I like having Rip on my team. Big fan of that guy. I think he was a really good player for a long time in the league. One of the early like catch and shoot. Also like a movement shooter, right? Like a catch it and launch from kind of any platform. A little better from the mid range probably than some people remember as well. I like Rip. I think he's kind of versatile. He can play like the 2-3, like a small 3 kind of deal. I think he just adds some scoring to our secondary unit that we probably need. So for pick number 25, coming back around, we're gonna add a little more size. This is a guy that plays like a big 3, specifically the 4. And then if we go really small, he can play our 5 for us as well. I believe he's a front office guy now in Philadelphia. I know that he was. I'm not sure if he's still there. A lot of people remember him from his time with the Clippers. But I'm going to take Elton Brand. Elton Brand was a very good basketball player. Made 2 All-Star teams, made 1 All-NBA team, and 1 Rookie of the Year in 1999. He averaged for his career in 1,058 games, a steal, and almost 2 blocks per game. So he was a really good defender. Excellent on the help side, which, as Ryan mentioned earlier, there's a need for help side defense in this format we've got going here because there's going to be a lot of scoring, I imagine, just because of the elite talent that we're drafting. Also, he went to Duke, so I mean, how could I let it? How could I let him slide so much further? You know, I mean, if nothing else, just draft all the Duke players, and you have a pretty good chance here. Elton Brand, welcome to the squad. We'd love to have you. Bring your front office experience here and help me build this team, please.
Yeah, great. I agree. Elton Brand, another underrated guy. Very, very good player. And pretty good in the front office too. A lot of places like him. He's been in Philadelphia for a while.
Yeah.
In the front office, doing a bunch of. He actually came out of retirement while in the front office at one point to play when they were really bad. He was also like 100 at that point, but in basketball years. All right, 2 picks I didn't expect you to make, but Elton Brand not as surprising. But I actually thought you were going to go in a different direction when you first started talking. So I'll go in that direction. I'll take Lamar Odom. Who
you got great
teams. Thank you. Lamar Odom. I'm gonna run the triangle with Kobe and Lamar. If we keep the Kardashians away, we'll be fine. I don't blame anything on her. I'm just trying to keep my team focused. Don't come after me, Kardashian people. Lamar. Yeah, whatever. Sure. You can't find me. Lamar Odom, I mean, the definition of versatility, right? Could do everything. He could probably play 3 positions. You could probably play him at a really small 5. He's 6'10". He could play the 3. He could play the 4. He played on those Paul Gasol, Andrew Bogut.
Almost.
Yeah, the Andrew Bogut Lakers. He wore gold. Andrew Bynum teams with that huge team that again ran the triangle and maybe the last team to effectively do it because no one understands the triangle. The guy who created it is dead. Not created it, but revolutionized it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, keeping with my my streak of taking skill, guys, length, defense, and enough offense to get the job done. Because at this point, these guys are only going to play in certain situations, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to take these versatile guys. And then I'm going to go. I'm a guy I'm surprised fell, but I get why, because later in his career did not go as well for him as I imagined he would have liked due to injuries. And I'm going to take Penny Hardaway. Another guy who could probably play 3 positions just due to his size, but can also handle the ball as well as anybody. Yep. And if I just need to outsize Bentley, that's the route I'll go. And I'll play an all 6'6" and up lineup, and AI will have nowhere to go. So yeah, really excited to have both those guys. I think I have like 15 guys who can play, 15 different positions. I haven't got 15 yet, but we're almost there.
Yeah.
And on to your last 2 picks, and then I have one more, I believe.
Yeah, I do. I have back-to-back here. Yeah. I like the Hardaway pick. He did fall a little further than I probably would have guessed. Like if you had asked me going into it, do I think that Penny Hardaway makes it to 27? I probably would have said no. But looking at the rosters, I understand why, So I'm going to make a pick here that you probably also are going to be a little, not confused, but probably throw you off a little bit here. But we're going to go with another guy who was early to the stretch 4 game. Someone that I remember most fondly as being an Orlando Magic player. I'm going to take Rashard Lewis. 91 win shares for his career, which is pretty good for a guy who played in Orlando in the 90s and did not play with Shaq. Made 2 All-Star teams, and for the entirety of his career, shot almost 40%. He's right under 39% from 3-point range, and he's got a little size to him. So I think that he's going to be a good addition to the roster, add some outside scoring where we probably need it in from our big guys, stretch the floor a little bit, Because I cannot type here. Excuse my keyboard sounds. I still cannot type here. Oh, boy. All right, so that leaves me with the last pick. My last pick. I'm going to take a guy who, on this list of possible draft picks that are left, definitely has the most highlights. Probably not the most highlight because Shaq obviously is on the list, and Kobe. They're gonna have the most like jaw-dropping highlights of the entire list. This guy might be top 5 for a number of like SportsCenter top 10 moments. He was super fun to watch. Not the most efficient. Didn't win the most games. But that's not really what I'm looking for here at the bottom of my roster because, like Ryan said, he's not going to play a whole bunch. But that's okay. I'm going to take Baron Davis. Baron Davis was super fun. Still made 2 All-Star teams and an All-NBA team, and also led the league in steals 2 years in a row. Or not 2 years in a row, excuse me, 2 times throughout his career, which, as we've alluded to, help side defense going to be a major thing here. As well as just putting on a show for the fans. He's going to sell jerseys. He's going to have highlight dunks. He's going to hit big threes. Baron Davis was a highlight reel in and of himself. He could fill it up. He could throw it down on folks. I really enjoyed watching him play. So give me Baron Davis here with my last pick. Kind of a fun pick to end the thing out. Another small guy, but that's all right. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'll say Rashard Lewis I actually had above Lamar Odom on my board, my big board, but I thought Lamar Odom fit my team design a little better. But I think Rashard Lewis is a better pick than Lamar Odom in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
But I just was like, when am I using Rashard Lewis? When I was like, I can just run a bunch of defensive players out there, which I think is good. Baron Davis, I had in my initial list. He didn't actually make my cut of my final 8 point guards. So he was outside of my top 8 because that's about what the list I made was about 8 to 10 of each position, except for center, which didn't have enough.
He's not on my final list either, but I figured he'd be the most
just
fun
went
pick
there. Yeah. He was on my initial list, not on my final list. So definitely a guy I like, and played a long time, kept trying to come back.
Yeah.
Like felt like every 2 years he was like, I'm coming back. And they were like, nah, we don't really need you to, man. You can stay retired. But yeah, I loved watching him do definitely a lot of highlights. He has that one dunk where he like hits the guy and like almost like cocks back.
Yeah.
And still throws it down. I don't know who he did that on, but that was a crazy dunk. All right. Well, with my last pick, I'm going to take the ultimate winner.
Oh no.
Another RC Buford beloved player. One of the all-time great nicknames. I don't believe in the clutch gene, but if it exists, he's got it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take Big Shot Bob Horry.
Yep.
How can you not take him here? He's the perfect.
I'm going to
denigrate
your pick because you have 1,000 guys on your team that are going to take the last shot.
Oh, Robert is. I will be putting him in at the end of the game. He's the perfect teammate. He plays defense. He rebounds. He shoots threes. Has won probably like 30 championships, something like that. One of my favorite Rockets as well. The other guy I thought about here was Sam Cassell, going another guard. But I think I have enough ball handlers. So I'm going to go Robert Horry. We're going to be super big. We're going to play a lot of defense. We're going to be able to shoot. And we're a good team. That's my final pick. Bentley, you want to recap who we got here?
I can. Yes, I can go down. I do like the Big Shot Bob pick. He's, if nothing else, a glue guy and like a culture man. All right, so let's just kind of run over these picks and then we give some closing thoughts, maybe some shout outs at the end of guys that we did not take but we had on our list here. All right, so my team first, we have Shaq, Kevin Garnett, Steve Nash, Paul Pierce, Grant Hill, Allen Iverson, Ben Wallace, Manu Ginobili, Gary Payton, Chris Webber, Alonzo Mourning, Richard Hamilton, Elton Brand, Rashard Lewis, and Baron Davis. And then Ryan's team, Tim Duncan, Tracy McGrady, Kobe Bryant, Jason Kidd, Dirk Nowitzki, Ray Allen, Dikembe Mutombo, Sean Marion, Spot Wallace, Chauncey Billups. That's Rasheed Wallace. Chauncey Billups, Andre Kirilenko, Vince Carter, Lamar Odom, Penny Hardaway, and big shot Robert Ory.
That team sounds good. That first team, meh. Second team, pretty good.
Yeah, meh, for sure. For sure. All right, Ryan. Give me some guys that you had that may not have gotten picked here, but you think may have been worthy of a look.
Yeah, so my point guard, my last two that were not taken, I had Sam Cassell next off the board. I think he's the better teammate, better traditional point guard. And then I had Stephon Marbury. After that, I think if you wanted some highlights, he could have been an option too, right?
Yep.
Maybe the greatest Chinese player of all time. All right, and then at the shooting guard, I had Eddie Jones was available, Jason Terry.
100 win shares for Eddie Jones.
Yeah. Eddie Jones probably should have been taken somewhere here if you were taking best player. Eventually, I went away from best player available and went to who I thought fit best. But Eddie Jones is better than Robert Ory.
Yep.
And probably better than a lot of other guys over his career. Michael Finley is another guy. Meta World Peace.
Yep.
Ron Artest. Anton Jameson, Derek Coleman, PJ Brown.
Yep.
And then I stopped going center because I wanted two centers and went away. So, but my centers that were not taken was Marcus Camby,
Yep.
Zydrunas Ilgauskas, and I put Jermaine O'Neal as a center, but you could have played him at the 4. I had him as a small 5.
It's on my list as well.
Yeah, he could have been a good pick for sure. But you can't really have Jermaine O'Neal like your 14th guy because he just doesn't make a lot of sense there, I think.
Yeah. All right, let's see. So I had Mike Bibby on my list. Andre Miller was on my list, another guy with 100 win shares for his career, played in 1,300 games. Let's see. Who do we have? Steve Francis I had on my list as well. Antoine Walker, the Celtics pick, who didn't really pan out, but had a lot of hype coming out, made 3 All-Star teams and all rookies first year. Peja Stojakovic was on my list because he averaged 17 a game for his career. It shot 40% from behind the arc.
Yep, he's on mine as well.
Yeah, I had him on my list. I had Jerry Stackhouse on my list and Antonio McDyess. They weren't great players, but they were definitely good contributing players all throughout the 90s or throughout their career, really. I don't remember if you had Glenn Robinson, but I put him down. Made 2 All-Star teams. He was a pretty good player. I had Latrell Sprewell as well. Made an All-NBA and an All-Defensive team in his career. That's pretty good. And I had Steve Smith from 1991.
Oh, yeah, underrated.
Yeah, underrated. 6'7" shooting guard. Averaged 14 a game for his career. Shot 36% from behind the arc. Pretty good guy to have on your team. And I had Tony Kukoc, Hall of Famer, 6th man of the year. Probably made the Hall of Fame because he played with Michael, but whatever. Hall of Fame's Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Okay, so those are kind of our best picks from the 90s. If we forgot anyone, we apologize. Have them reach out to us, and we'd be happy to have them on to discuss. Ryan, do you have any thoughts for the people before we close this thing out?
Not much. Sorry about the camera decides to unfocus there, but yeah, it's real cool. I always like doing these things. It's interesting to think about like Shaq and like Vince Carter being in the same decade because they almost seem like they're different eras, but they played within the same time period, but also far away from each other in a lot of ways. So it's cool to see a lot of guys I love because I saw the middle to the end of a lot of their careers as I was growing up. And I know a lot of guys you love, so it was fun. And I'm excited to see me win in 2K. I think we'll probably win in 5 games would be my guess. We'll go 4-1. It should be pretty simple, I think.
Should be pretty simple, he says. Well, I disagree. I think my team probably wins. But I'm excited to find out. I'm sure the people at home are as well. Yeah, a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable to look back on some of these guys that you may have forgotten about, or like Ryan said, you didn't realize. Like you think of them playing in 2 separate eras, but they really played at the same time. Yeah, very enjoyable. We may do this again. We may just redraft individual years. I don't know. We're gonna figure some more stuff out going forward for the off season until the season starts back up again. Hopefully, we'll have some trade news. Maybe Dame, maybe James Harden. Who knows what's gonna happen? But if it happens in the NBA, we'll talk about it. Shout out Marshawn Beauchamp scoring 83 in that pro-am game. Good for you, bud.
Yep.
Better learn Mandarin, as the kids are saying. But that's what we got for y'all tonight. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate all the interaction and the comments and questions. For myself and for Mr. Buford, y'all have a wonderful evening, and we will see you same bet time, same bet channel next week.
See ya.